Okay, so moving forward, now that we've gone through the fifth phase of the 5 phases of the design thinking framework, we're going to move into UX design sprints. And UX design sprints, pretty much, well, UX design sprints is a time-bound process within 5 phases, and it typically spreads over 5 full days, 5 full 8-hour days. So everything that we've been talking about, all of the steps we've been talking about, everything that we've been going through in terms of, what the 5 phases are, all of those are encapsulated within a design sprint. So everything that we talked about happens within a design sprint. Um, let me, so to be very clear, all of these phases, the empathizing, defining, ideation, prototyping, test, it all happens within a design sprint. So let's move forward and talk about what the design sprint is. So you're going to move through all 5 of these phases in one sprint, in one design sprint. So a design sprint is a time-bound process with 5 phases, and you're going to see that those phases really mirror the 5 phases of the design thinking process, typically spread over 5 full 8-hour days. So the design, that should be sprint, not spring. The design sprint goal is to solve a critical design challenge through, wait a minute, let me fix this typo, because if you go back and look, it may be confusing. This is sprint. Okay, that was just driving me crazy. All right. So the design sprint goal is to solve a critical design challenge through designing, prototyping, and testing ideas with users, right? So that's the goal. Design sprint, the design sprint has 5 phases. And these phases are to understand, ideate, decide, prototype, and test. Now I know it sounds like these are identical to the 5 phases of the design thinking framework, but it makes sense because if you think about it, the design sprint is the time frame, or it's the time management tool, or it's the execution tool, so to speak, that manages how we go through the 5 phases. So it only makes sense that the 5 steps of the sprint would be in direct parallel and very similar to the phases that they're managing. And it'll make sense as we go through it. So they have 5 phases. The first phase is to understand. The second phase is to ideate. The third phase is to decide. The fourth stage is to prototype. And then the fifth phase is to test. But this is for the design sprint. So the benefits of a design sprint is, one, it saves time. So it cuts the decision process from months to 5 days. So Angela, you asked a very valid point when you were saying, how long do we go through this process? Do we just keep designing forever and ever? A design sprint, everything that we've been talking about should happen within 5 days. Create effective path for bringing a product to market. That's another benefit. So we're working through the process of the steps we're going to take for whatever product we're building, app application, to bring it to market. Another benefit of the design sprint is that it makes sure that we prioritize the user. So going through this process and following the structure, following the framework that's established, it makes sure that you actually create a product that is user focused. Another benefit of going through the design sprint is that it allows us to test the product before we launch it. So it reduces the chances of us, it doesn't make it foolproof, but it does reduce the chances of us producing an app that's going to flop and waste money or fail, you know what I mean, or be an epic fail. So the question is, when do you actually sprint? Like, when do we design sprint? Does every change to a website, does every change to an application require us to go through a full sprint. So these are the things that you're going to look for when you're determining whether or not it's a change we can just go in and make, or do we need to go through the whole, design sprint process? So the question is, are there many potential challenge solutions? So are there a lot of things that need to be addressed when we're looking at this website, when we're looking at this feature or app? Are there many potential challenge solutions? Another thing is the change that we're looking at making, or the pain point that we're looking at addressing. Does it require people from cross-functional teams? So what that means exactly is, if I'm looking at, say for example, a feature with the landscaping site. And let's use our FedEx example. So let's say we're looking at FedEx and we get feedback that a button is in the wrong position. Like a person can't figure out how to track their shipping. The question is, do I need to involve the development team? Do I need to involve designers? Do I need to also get permission from the stakeholders to make that change? Is it going to require me pulling in people from different teams to make this change? The other question to ask is the challenge scope wide enough for an entirely 5-day sprint? So is this something that can be changed in a few minutes, or does it truly take us going through a 5-day process? So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, if, let's just say we find out that we use a green tint and the hue is off slightly, and the hue is not passing accessibility because it's a little bit too light, and we need to make the button a little bit darker green so that the text on top of it shows. Do we really need to have a 5-day design process, a design sprint to make that button darker, or can we just make that? Can we just change that? Right. Yeah, just change it. Yep. So those are questions, but if the answers to any of these questions are yes, it doesn't have to be all of the questions, but if the answers to any of these questions is yes, then you may need to actually go through the 5-day process and do a design sprint. So are there many potential challenges that we need to address? Does it require us pulling in people from multiple teams, from cross-functional teams? Is the challenge scope wide enough for a sprint? So those are the questions that, as an organization, as a design team, that should be asked before you move into a design sprint. So coming back to it again, the 5 phases, it's a time-bound process. How many days is a design sprint? How many days?
5 days.
Yeah, and how long are these days?
8 hours.
8-hour days. So understand, ideate, decide, prototype, and test. So again, the timeline takes up to 5 days. Each phase takes a full day. So you're spending 1 day on each phase. Each phase is hands-on, and each phase should be collaborative. So here's a scenario, right? Landscape Escape's online platform is seeing a nosedive in usage and number of people who book services through the site. You are a part of the UX team to research the challenge and design a solution to move the numbers back into the right direction. So let's just hypothetically say that's the scenario that we are, the challenge that we are seeking to resolve. So if we move into the first phase or day 1, right? The first thing we're doing on day 1 is we are understanding. So here's the difference. During the design phase, when we go through the understand phase, we're talking to experts. So during this time, we're talking to experts, we're talking to departments, and we're talking to different people who work in different industries so that we can kind of get an expert feedback on what the challenge is. So what that looks like is we're sitting down with, let's just say, for example, if we do work with the landscaping company, we're sitting down with the business owners to say, well, what's the standard in terms of how landscaping sites are handled? What are some typical things that should be included? We may be talking to different departments to say, well, what type of services do you offer? So we may be sitting down with the guys or the girls who actually go out into the fields and do the work. We may be sitting down actually having conversations with them about the different things that need to be included in the site. If there are industry professionals that exist in the space, then maybe we're talking to them about, what the problem is, what the challenge is, so that we kind of understand the business layer. So for you, Janella, when you were saying, I really don't understand anything about the industry. I don't really understand enough about fitness to come up with these crazy eights. During the understanding phase, that's when you would actually sit down and ask those questions to kind of get a deeper understanding of the product. So you don't have to have like a deep understanding of all the details and intricacies of what it takes to track someone weight loss, but you will sit down with the business owners, you and your team, and kind of get an understanding of the overall product that they offer and what features need to be included in their online presence. So that may look like, back to the fitness example, it's not like a personal trainer is sitting there telling you about caloric intake. You got to burn 3,500 calories to lose a pound. Like they're not telling you that level of detail, right? But they are saying that we offer a product to our clients that helps them track their fitness, and we need to make sure that we track their weight, their BMI, their cholesterol, their blood pressure, and we need it to be a numeric system. So they're giving you a very like high level overview of what that is, but that allows you to understand what the need is. So they may say, like right now, our competitors, and you may also have a conversation where they're telling you, our competitors, they offer this. So they may actually pull up another app on the screen if you're in a conference room, and they may show you where our competitors, they offer features where the tracking can tie into their Apple Watch. They're offering features where it's showing a digital graph and a pie graph or a pie chart. So they're showing you that so you get an understanding. So that's when you're sitting down with the industry experts. The objective of the understand phase is to assist them more clearly defining what the design challenge is. And it's also, again, coming away with a user first always approach. So I just really want to hone in, coming back to that fitness example, the understand phase, maybe you sitting down with personal trainers, other people who have designed fitness apps in the past. It may even be developers who just have feedback on how the app is being used. And it also may be the stakeholder in the room saying what they want to offer and how it's going to help them have a greater market share, right? And then they're going to say, because right now, everybody is leaving our company or no one's using our online app. And I think that we could have more people use our online app if users could tie their results into their smart devices, right? So that may be understanding what's out there, what they believe the challenge to be, and what solution they're proposing. And because we think it'll make it easier for the user if they can tie it into their smartwatch or device. So that's the understand phase when you're having a conversation with the experts, departments, and industries. So back to, let me go back. So with the landscaping, let's just say, for example, they're telling you, well, our competitors they're actually accepting landscaping requests for service online, and the user can sign up for a service, pay for a service, and the customer knows, how much the lawn is going to be, and they don't have to call us. So we felt like the reason that we're losing business is because the process that they have to go through to book a service with us is too cumbersome, right? So let's just say that's your understand phase. Hypothetical, sales are slumping because landscaping services doesn't make it possible to book a service. So let's just say, that's your day one understanding that you come to. So on day one, you sat down, you talked to everybody, and you found out that sales were slumping because their online service doesn't make it possible to book a service. That happens on day one, okay? So day two, you guys are going to come back. You're going to come in the room. We call it a war room in Agile. but you're gonna come back and you all are gonna say, like we did today, right? You're gonna come up with all these possible solutions. You may do a crazy eight, you may do a scamper. What was the other one? I can't remember what the other one was right now, but you may use one of those brainstorming sessions to come up with possible solutions. So day two, all you guys are doing is just coming up with all these possible solutions, looking at everybody's crazy eight, pulling ideas from this one and that one, applying Scamper to the crazy eight ideas that you guys come up with, sketching. This is what's happening for the whole workday on day two. You're just sketching and coming up with ideas and throwing stuff out, and you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like a whole day for 8 hours. That's what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Yes.
Day three, you decide. So on day three, you come back fresh, right? You all come back and from all the brainstorming you did yesterday, you choose a direction you're gonna go in. So you're gonna say, this is the design that we're going with. These are the features we're gonna add. This is what we're gonna start building out. So you also start thinking about testing during this phase. So during this phase, even though you're not testing, you're thinking about testing. So during this phase, you're kind of answering those other questions. Okay, we're gonna go with this design. Who are we gonna test? Who are we gonna include? Where are we going to conduct the test? How are we gonna conduct the test? Are we gonna do interviews? Are we gonna do in person? Are we gonna do hot jar? Like, what are we gonna do? And at the end of day three, you're gonna create a step-by-step blueprint for your solution. So just imagine this. Imagine you come in, it's 8 a.m. in the morning or 8:30 in the morning, and you guys, let's say you spend from 8 until 12 before you go to lunch. Let's say you spend, I'm just making this up, I don't know what the time frame would be, but I'm just trying to give you a hypothetical. So let's say you spend from 8 until 12 going over the brainstorms from yesterday, and you guys finally make a decision, right? So you make a decision and then you go to lunch. Let's say you come back and let's just say from 1 until 2, you have a conversation about testing, like who are we going to test? Where are we going to test them? What tools we're going to use, right? And let's say from 2 until 5, you guys go through the process of creating a step-by-step blueprint for your solution. And after you do the blueprint, so the blueprint may actually look like that paper wire sketch, right? Or it may look like you guys did on the whiteboard, stepping through the process and building out that flow, that user flow. So remember we talked about user flow? So the user flow is a blueprint. So during the end of day three, you guys are kind of mapping out, this is where they're gonna start. And then after they start, they end up on the welcome page. And from the welcome page, they can go from sign in as a user, or sign in as a non-user. All of the stuff we talked about. So you're mapping out that blueprint or that user flow by the end of day three. So then day 4, when you come back to work, you're going to start prototyping. So on day 4, it's Thursday now. So now it's Thursday and you guys are prototyping the user map that you laid out yesterday. So you're going through and you're doing a prototype. In addition to building out the prototype, you're also going to finalize the interview questions, right? So you're gonna look at those interview questions, make sure everything is good and inclusive and it covers all the possible pain points. You're gonna confirm testing schedules. So now you're kind of reaching out to the company, hey, do you have this conference room booked, or is it, or you're sending out a Teams or whatever schedule to say, we're gonna be running tests from 3 until 5, and maybe you send out invitations, or your team is sending out invitations to everyone for tests. You're reaching out to the people who are going to participate in the test and kind of just confirm that they're going to be there. Hey, just calling to remind you that we're going to run that UX test tomorrow. Are you still available tomorrow at 3? You make location arrangements, you secure the test subjects, and you make sure your prototype is good to go. So you and the team, you're kind of going through together and you're kind of clicking through this prototype and making sure everything works. And again, at this phase, you're at a low fidelity prototype. So this is happening on Thursday. typically, hypothetically. And you have to remember also, it's a team, right? So some team members may be working on the interview questions. Another team member may be working on calling everybody to make sure the schedules are confirmed. Another team member may be working on the first 3 views of the prototype, and another team member may be working on the 4th, 5th, and 6th views of the prototype, right? So, it's a team. All of you guys are getting all this stuff done together. And then Friday, day 5 comes around, and now you start testing. And on day 5, everyone shows up, and you're going through this testing process. Right? So you're like testing and you're going back and forth. And like I said before, you're going to get feedback on the test. And then the feedback that you get from the test is going to take you all the way back in this process to prototyping. And then you're going to, so let's say, for example, with the landscaping example, let's say, for example, we said we wanted to have big panels where they could choose to cut the grass or to get the hedges cut or whatever. And let's say that the panels were confusing and people didn't know they can click on the panels. We may go back to the prototyping phase and add the check boxes with words that say click here to select and then run the test again. Right? So it's that back and forth, back and forth. Is this making sense so far? Are you guys following me?
Yes.
Okay. So again, the benefits of going through this process is that it's all about the user, right? That's one of the, it's all about the user because everything is just centered on what are they trying to do? How can we make this easy for them? How can we make this the best experience for them? How can we make this enjoyable? How can we make this intuitive? And then from there, another thing that's beneficial with a design sprint is that everybody in the room is valuable. It values every person. So the stakeholder is valuable because we want to make sure that whatever the business goal is being met. Because ultimately the business goal is our job security. If the business fails, then that means sales fail. And if sales fail, they don't make enough money. They don't make enough money, they start laying people off, right? So the stakeholders coming and saying, hey, there's an issue where we're losing a lot of customers because they can't book a service online. The stakeholder is valuable in their input. Even the interns, you may be an intern, you're going to be valuable because your input is fresh and you're not locked into a stale method, right? So your input is valuable because you have a fresh green perspective on it. Developers may be in the room. Their input is very valuable because they kind of help us streamline the ideas we come up with. So like I said, with my day 1 example of the flying butterfly that lands on the flower that needs to be cut, the developer may say, yeah, that's too much and that's going to be too complicated and there's no value add to that, right? So everybody in the room is valuable. Another benefit is that it just streamlines the focus down to 5 days. It also lowers the risk of an unsuccessful market debut. Like I said before, just rolling something out without thinking about this, developing a website or a web app without going through these processes, there's a high chance that you're developing something that no one wants, or that's not usable, or that's not as awesome as you think it is. Going through the design sprint, like I said, it validates your ideas. It validates what you think is true. It validates what you think will work. Because when you go through testing, it may or may not pan out the way you think it is when it gets in front of real people. Another benefit of a design sprint is that it's versatile. So you can schedule it at any time, right? So if you get feedback at any time saying that something isn't working or something needs to be improved, it's such a short sprint. You can kind of just throw that in there and go through the process if that's what your team is dedicated to. So the question may be, and this is what I really want to point out. I don't want you guys to get confused between the design sprint. So there's five phases that a design sprint is comprised of, right? And it's understand, ideate, decide, prototype, and test. But there's also five phases of the design thinking framework, which is empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. They are very similar and they come across as being very parallel. And when you test, I don't want you to get them confused. Some of them actually do overlap. But this is how I want you to think about it. Look at this term. This will help you a lot with the clear distinction because they work together. The design thinking, this is the framework for how you think, right? So the design thinking framework is managed by the design sprint phases, right? So you're managing your thinking, you're taking everything that you're thinking about and you're making sure that your thought process is executed within 5 days. So it makes sense that, during the empathize phase, when you're interviewing the customers and you're getting that feedback, it makes sense that during this phase that you're also in this phase, that you're also sitting down with the stakeholders in the business. It makes sense that that's happening on day one, right? So when we go back here, and we talk about, so phase one is understand. So think of this as this is the action that is guiding the thought process. So think of it like that. This is the action that is guiding or managing my thought process. Phase two is where you ideate, right? So phase two is like with everything that I came up with when I was going through this thought process, when I was, creating a persona, writing the user persona, writing the problem statement, all of that stuff that happened there, that's when I'm moving into the phase. And now I'm going to come up with possible solutions. Now we're brainstorming, right? And after we're brainstorming, that's when we're deciding. After that, we move into decide. And of all the ideas, decide which one to start building. So the difference between this, I really want you guys to pay attention, is that here when I'm deciding, when we go, this is deciding out of all our crazy eights, which one are we going to build, right? Whereas before, where we define, and the other 5 phases, we're just defining what problem we're going to address. So let me show you a comparison between the two. So here's one versus the other. The design thinking framework versus the design sprint. So let's look at them side by side. The design thinking framework is an overarching framework with 5 phases. Empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. It's an overall philosophy, right? So pay attention to the word philosophy. It's an overall philosophy for approaching problem solving. So it's an overall thought process that you should be going through. Another thing about the design thinking framework is when we talk about timeline, it spans the entire product development process and it's open-ended. So when we move into design sprints, that's a 5-day process. Design thinking is a never-ending process because you're always thinking about, how can we improve it? What feedback are we getting? Another thing is the design thinking framework utilizes many different methods and tools. versus what we're talking about right now, the design thinking framework. I'm sorry, the design sprint is time bound. So it's time bound and it has 5 phases. Understand, ideate, decide, prototype, and test. So we're in action. So this is just basically what's the order of actions we're taking based on all this information that we gathered from this. It's a specific implementation plan for solving a specific challenge. So it's a very specific implementation plan, meaning like we're going to choose one thing and we're going to move forward with that one thing. So we're going to, out of all of our brainstorms, out of all of our crazy eights and prototyping and wireframes, we're going to choose one. Another time, like I said, it's strictly time bound from start to finish, and it typically spread. You may be at a company, maybe they may do 2 weeks, maybe they do one, but it typically spans over 5 full business days. And it's one method with a very defined process, right? Whereas up here, we're utilizing many different methods and tools. So when you think about the two, that's the difference. I think one of the easiest ways, though, to have a very clear distinction is that this is the design thinking framework. It's the thought process, it's the philosophy that you need to follow for problem solving, right? This is how you should be thinking about it. The sprint governs the actions you take. So what am I doing specifically? So it's like what you're doing, how much time you got to do each phase, right? So those are the differences to try to keep them clear in your mind. So again, define. Design sprints during the define phase might focus on refining the problem statement, aligning stakeholders, analyzing the user journey, and generating ideas that specifically address the pain points I defined in the previous sprint. The focus approach helps lay the groundwork for the following phases of prototyping, testing, and implementation within the design thinking framework. So yeah. Is this making sense? Because stop me if you have questions.
No, it makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense. So a way to also differentiate, I'm saying, could be to say in the thinking process, to empathize, you have to actually listen and hear what, the need is. Whereas in the sprint process, it's like, all right, I got you. I understand now. So I'm moving forward.
That's a really good way of thinking of it. Yeah, I like that. And also pointing out that they're saying during the define phase, you might focus on refining the problem statement, because remember we went through that problem statement. That was in the design thinking framework is where we just came up with the problem statement. So it's kind of like once we actually really start defining, you know what I mean, like that design phase, that problem statement may even get a little bit more tighter and more focused, more of a bullseye on it. And the ideate phase, design sprints can be employed to rapidly generate and evaluate ideas. So the time constraints and structured activities of the design sprint can help teams generate a large volume of ideas within a short time frame. So it's like instead of us getting, you ever heard of analysis paralysis or decision paralysis, right? Because you have to stick to that 5-day time frame, it helps you get the ideas out quick. Because the quicker you can get it to market, you really don't know what's going to work. And a lot of time, I have definitely been guilty of this in my own life of taking forever. Like I'll have an idea for something and I'll take forever to put it out because I'm trying to think, is this going to work? Are they going to like this? Well, what if they don't like this? Well, should I change this color? Should it be this way? Right? And you can get caught in that loop if you don't have something forcing you to push it out. And no matter how much you go back and forth, you are not going to know the answer until you get it in front of a real person. And when you get it in front of real people, that's when you get the real feedback. All of the stuff that's happening in your head is not validated. So it's just like this process really forces design teams to just get it out. And again, a lot of stuff that I love about Agile and UX design is that it's life principles too. It applies to everything in life, not just design. The prototype. So the prototype phase is where design sprints find their strongest application. Design sprints excel in creating prototypes that can be tested and validated. And the design sprint approach allows teams to quickly translate ideas into a visual or interactive prototype that represents the potential solution. Again, it just helps you from getting stuck in that loop. You think it's a good idea, okay, test it. You know what I mean? Let's see if it really is. Let's not talk about it for 10 days. Let's put it in front of people and see if it is what you think it is. And then you get that feedback where you can come back and be like, man, I thought everybody would know to click there, but 10 people didn't. Let's move it. Let's change what it says. Let's change the position on the button. Test. Design sprints integrate seamlessly into this phase by providing a structure for conducting user testing sessions and collecting feedback on the prototypes developed during the sprint. The insights gained from testing informs further iteration and refinement, right? So that's what I really wanted to get through. I want to talk about, that's just enough time. I want to talk about the homework assignment. So moving back, coming all the way back to here, right, where we understand, ideate, decide, prototype. The way companies handle this is you need to keep your mind open, because what I've noticed is that you always have a human factor, right? So we have the general rules of how things work, but different companies color it a little bit differently. Some companies strictly stick to it. Some companies don't. Some companies may skip steps. But the most important thing is for you to know what the correct process is, what the standardized process is, and to keep your eyes on that, but also to remain flexible. So I don't want you guys to get hired somewhere and then you feel lost because let's say you get hired and they don't include all the stakeholders, right? And it's a frustrating process. And it's like, why aren't the developers here? How come we're not having conversations, right? You know it's supposed to happen and you can request it and ask for it, but you also have to remain flexible to know that every company has its own culture. In terms of, applying for positions and getting hired and passing your certification exams, it's important that you know the right way to do it. But I just don't want you guys to be thrown off or nervous if you get into an environment and they don't follow the process exactly, you know what I mean, like the way it should be followed. Because that a lot of times people don't follow it exactly. But I just want you to be aware of that. So moving back so that this all makes sense. There's a lot of information and I try to make it make sense. This is what we have been working through. We have been working through empathizing. So that's been the interviews, the questions, the interviews that you guys we're looking at the design thinking framework. All of those questions that we went over last week, right? That was all part of the empathizing phase. The finding was when we looked at all of the problems that surfaced and we pinpointed a concrete, a succinct problem statement, right? So we were like, this is the problem statement. And then from that problem statement, that's when we went into the ideation phase. When we started to just come up with different brainstorms and different ideas. And then from there, we came up with prototypes, which is where you guys are now. So where you guys are now, that's us working through like the user flow, What should happen first, second, third, our site maps. We're moving into prototyping this week. You have your paper prototypes, you have your paper workflows, and we're gonna build out the screens now. So now, and we're in this cycle right here where you're getting a solid understanding of the universal wireframing tools and images, glyphs, that's a better word, glyphs that are used. And then, so you're gonna, right here, we're building out the prototypes using that. So at this point, all of your work, so this is where you should be. You should have created all of your interview questions, right? You should have researched and interviewed all of your people. You should have gathered all of the information you need to empathize. Your user statement, I'm sorry. Let me go back, so I'm calling stuff the right thing. Your user persona should be created. Your problem statement should be very succinct. So right here, gathering all the information from discovery, you should have a very distinct, a very defined problem statement. It should be clear, right? And based on that problem statement, you should have come up with a bunch of different ways to approach it. So you came up with a bunch of different problem solving. You have looked at other websites for other landscaping companies, right? What part was that? That was the competitive, what was that called? The competitive analysis, right? That was part of our brainstorming. You should have looked at other websites, other fitness websites, other landscaping websites. You should have gone through Crazy 8, because we did that together, right? After your rapid sketches, you should have also applied Scamper to those to kind of just like look at it, assess, I like this, I don't like that, pull it in, pull it out. At this point, it's time to make a decision in terms of what design solution from the Crazy 8 and from Scamper, from looking at competitors, what solution am I moving forward with? So you move into prototyping. So then the prototyping, you should have all of your user flows mapped out, right? So this is the design I'm choosing. And this design flows this way. So you chose your design. This is the design that I want to test. And I want to start building this out. So that's where you move into the hierarchy. And I did want to revisit that. So coming back to here, right? Prototyping practices. So remember when we talked about today, information architecture on a high level, it's a high level diagram or flowchart that shows how users can move through a product like a website or an app. So to present information in ways that users can understand and navigate with ease and enjoyment, usually resulting in a sitemap. So when we look here, it was like, what are the main, this is hierarchical. So it's like, what's the main important sections of the site? What are the main important steps or actions that people are coming here to look? And then these are subordinate. The main thing that people like, so like if this was a shopping website, the most important thing that people are coming here for, they're looking to shop, lookbook, search, log in, look at their cart, and go to, whatever, footer. These are like the main sections of the site. And then, but once you go to the main sections, you can have subsidiary sections, but you just want to make sure it's easy to navigate. Because I wouldn't want to have, like, you don't want to come to a website and you see, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, 30, you don't want to see 30 links. That's just overwhelming. But if you just tell me like what's the most important sections I need to go to, and then once I get to those sections, it can break down into subordinate sections, that's fine. So that's the point of the hierarchy. So hierarchy refers to how topics are prioritized and subordinated. Hierarchies emphasize topics that are broader and more important, which in turn contain smaller or less important topics, right? Sequence, sequence refers to the order in which a user can navigate through a product's hierarchy, like navigating from the home page to the shop. You know what I mean? So for you guys, it would be, what's the sequence? How are they navigating from the home page to actually signing up for a fitness service? What's the sequence that they're going through to go from the home page to actually booking a landscaping service? So I want to show this again. Right, so again, this is the hierarchy. What's the most important paths for them to see first? What are the most important paths? And then sequences, what are the steps that they're going to take to get to what the ultimate goal is, which is to book a service or to buy something? What's that? What's step one? What's step two? What's step three? What's the sequence? Sequence refers to the order in which users can navigate through the hierarchy, like navigating from the homepage to shop again. But I want to emphasize this. Visual hierarchy is a well-known technique when it comes to content structures, and is derived from the Gestalt psychological theory that stresses presenting content based on its relevance and importance. Wireframing uses the structure for websites where a hierarchy of information is needed on the basis of importance of each element. Wireframes are designed keeping this in mind. The content is divided into sections and are put in a hierarchy based on the importance. So y'all gotta think about what's most important, because it's all about the psychology of, the user. Are you guys have any questions?
No,
No.
Okay, so moving on to going back to this overall view, I just want you guys to keep in mind, because sometimes you know how they say it's hard to see the forest because you only see individual trees. Trying to come back up so you can see the whole forest. Empathize, the interviews, the questions, the discovery, define what single problem am I going to address? Ideate, what are the possible ways I can solve this problem that I have clearly defined? Okay, what's the prototype? And then you start prototyping it out. So this is where you guys are. So because we are here, the homework assignment is, wait, let me make sure I say this. All of the user flows should be done. All of your user flows should be done at this point. All of your interviews should be done at this point. All of your personas, your user personas, all of that stuff should be completed. So to complete your prototype, we are here. This is homework. So for homework, so now you're gonna create the paper wireframes. Let me make sure I'm saying the right thing, because I keep saying it wrong. I don't want to confuse you. What are we doing? So right now, you guys should have paper workflows, so paper sketches of workflows of everything. You also should have, well, not yet, paper workflows of every step. You should have that. You should have, now we're moving into prototyping, the wireframes, okay? So in order for you guys, I want you to create a paper wireframe for each of the views. In addition to creating the paper wireframe for each of the views and the flows, I also want you to have digital workflows, which you guys already started, so you kind of ahead of the game, right? So I want you guys to have digital workflows and paper workflows. And then you're going to take each one of these views and you're going to create paper wireframe prototypes, right? Paper wireframe prototypes. Each one of these views, right? You should have a paper wireframe of the welcome page, a paper wireframe of login, member home, right? High fidelity. I'm sorry, not high fidelity, low fidelity. You also need to have digital. So I want paper and digital workflows for each path. I want paper and digital wireframes for each view, paper and digital. So having said that, this is the link to the Figma tutorial for beginners for Figma. Make sure you go through all 6 of these videos because it's gonna really show you how to use Figma the proper way. And after you're gonna complete all of the exercises. I know the exercises don't have anything to do with our homework assignment, but you still have to complete all of the follow along work exercises with the Figma tutorial. The videos are short, it's not long. Like the videos are like, I don't think any video is longer than 5 minutes, right? So you're gonna go through the videos and you're gonna actually learn how to really use Figma the proper way. After you, I don't want this to come last. This. Then after you complete the beginners tutorial on Figma, you're gonna watch a second tutorial. And the second tutorial is gonna show you how to import libraries. And you're gonna import a design library that already has the wireframing toolkit for you guys. And then you're gonna use the universal images and you're gonna create those digital wireframes. So here's the map, right? So a logo, it can be any type of icon or image for the logo, right? So this is a logo. This is the universal image to represent an image. The headers, like where it says like H1, H2, H3, as long as you guys make it visually bigger, that's fine. Sometimes, like if the mock is super generic, you have like no idea what the headers or the heading sections are going to be. That's not the case. So going back to our FedEx example, let me go back to the home page. So typically these are headers. You see how like these sections define different sections of the page, and you see the text is bigger. So this will be considered a header. This is like an H1. This will be considered an H1. This will be considered an H2. So when we talk about hierarchy, like the main section of the page is talking about small business owners, but then the subordinate or the subsidiary of this topic is an H2, a second in priority. Grow with a cash grant, right? And this is also an H2. Sometimes if you don't, like if you have no idea what the wording should be, you'll just write like H1, H2, lorem ipsum, H2, lorem ipsum. You guys do have a general understanding, so yours can be like to make sure that the hierarchy and the size is there, where you're showing like this may be book a service, right? And then this H2 may be lawn care, and then this is just lorem ipsum. You're not going to dictate what it says, but you do have enough information to know that, right? Yours may say book a fitness assessment or book a fitness service, and then the H2, the subsidiary, may say book an embody, and then all of this is just lorem ipsum. Right, so that's how your wireframe is going to go. Going back to here, so that's here. When you see text, you're going to use lorem ipsum for text. This is the universal symbol for a video player. So this is the symbol you use to represent that a video player is in your mock. This is the universal symbol for input text. Like if somebody's typing in a field, this is the universal symbol for that. Universal symbol for a button is honestly just a generic gray, square that says button. This is the universal symbol for check boxes, radio buttons, menu items. Like, so if there was like a menu item that they could drop down, this is the universal symbol for that. The menu bar, like up here where you have navigation, this is the universal symbol for a menu bar, a nav bar. This is the universal symbol for groups of a field, combo text. So these are the universal symbols, right? So what I'm saying is Figma has libraries that you can import into it, and all these symbols are there for you, and all you have to do is drag and drop. I don't have access to this design. I can't really show you where it would be. But yeah, when you go through the tutorial, it'll show you. But yeah, so you're gonna go through the second tutorial is where you're gonna go through how you actually import the library, and you're gonna import a UX library. UX library. And there's gonna be a whole lot to choose from, because there's a lot of contributors, but you just want to choose a UX library. It's gonna have all of the universal symbols for you that you can just drag into your wireframe. And then I want you to review more on Sprint. So that's your homework. The homework is, again, to complete the beginner's Figma tutorial. So that, and then I want you to import a wireframe library. I think this isn't clear. Let me make this clear. It's 12. Just so you know exactly what the tangibles are. You're gonna create paper and digital workflows for each user path. Do you guys know what I mean when I say that? So going back to this example, right? So you're gonna have digital and paper workflows for this, the overall, like the top level workflow, and then you're gonna come into each view. So what's the user flow for contact us? What's the user flow for embody? What's the user flow for stats? I'm sorry, yeah, what's the user flow for book service? And you see here, I need that user flow. So digital and paper, that's what I mean by that.
Does it need to be separated, like moved over to the right like that? Because I think I did that already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you already have it, that's fine. Just make sure you have a user flow for each view. So this is like the one that shows the overall, like from the home page, all the different paths they can go. But then you want to pull out each one so that you have like the individual path for each. You have the individual workflow for each path, for each page. Think of it of every page they can go to from the hierarchy. Remember we talked about hierarchy. So if you think about hierarchy, what are the major paths on the home page? And then make sure you have a workflow for each one of those major paths, what it looks like when they land on that page. So like going back to this example, hold on, pull it. Okay, yeah, so yeah, I hate when you do that. Okay. So going back to here, so like this is like the overall sitemap, right? So this is like the big top view. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is like the first user flow, which is showing me that I have major paths of shop, lookbooks, search, login, cart. But what happened when I get on the denim page? What's that workflow? When I get on the page for shorts, what's that user flow? So this is the overarching, but you also need individual workflows or user flows for all of the pages they can land in, paper and digital. So that would be like if this was the home page, so say for example, this whole thing right here is the home page. If we went into shop, and this right here will be shop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So you want to create a paper and digital workflow for each user path, and then you want to create a paper and digital wireframe, emphasis on low fidelity. High school fidelity. Yep, there it is. Emphasis for each of you. So that's what you should have. So what's gonna help you complete that is the first thing you need to do is you need to go through, don't just watch it, like actually follow along and complete all of these assignments for the Figma beginner tutorial. Once you finish that, watch the second tutorial, which is gonna show you how to import a library, and you're gonna search for and import a UX library. You're gonna use those universal symbols to create these wireframes. But these are the symbols as a guide to help you know what to use for where. And then just read this. It's just more understanding of design sprints. Any questions about homework?
No.
Yes, I got one question.
Okay.
Is it possible, because I can't log into, because the link is saved on my computer for the homework. Is it possible that you can email me the link?
Oh, yeah, this right here?
Yeah, the Google Docs link for the
Okay. You want me to put it in chat or email it to you?
email it, please, because
Okay, let me do it now because I cannot promise I won't forget. But okay, so that's everything for class. So let me stop the stream.